All right, let's talk dynasties. Why don't we? What is a dynasty? Are the Chiefs a dynasty? And how do you keep a dynasty going? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. Really, I want to talk about what makes a dynasty and how the Chiefs can potentially first are they a dynasty, and then can they continue and keep it going, and can they be a team that's not just competing for Super Bowls every year now, but still 10 years down the line competing for Super Bowls now. So first we have to define what is or isn't a dynasty, and it feels like the line tends to be somewhere in between 3 and 4 championships. I can't think of a single scenario where a team has won 4 championships with some of the same personnel and it isn't considered a dynasty. I also, usually, I can't think of another scenario where a team only has 2 championships and isn't considered a dynasty. Usually it's at least 3, and then some are considered a dynasty with 3, some aren't considered a dynasty with 3. This chart right here, you see the Patriots, who were in the 2000s and in the 2010s as well, the late 2010s. They had 6. That's obviously a dynasty. Steelers with 4, obviously a dynasty as well. In the 70s, Packers, who I included, even though technically they only had 2 Super Bowls, and I'm just talking Super Bowl era here, but they did have a bunch of NFL championships before. So again, you could debate whether that's a Super Bowl era dynasty or not, but it's at the very least they won a bunch of championships. The 80s and 90s 49ers. The 90s Cowboys only had 3 in that stretch, but it was 3 and 4 years, so that's usually considered a dynasty status as well. And then kind of the debatable ones, the 70s through 80s Raiders and the 80s through 90s Redskins, who both had 3, but it wasn't in a totally short amount of time, and also there was some changes there with the people involved. So those are debatable ones, but yeah, I feel like the top 5 are kind of obvious dynasties. So okay, that's a dynasty. Well, what do you typically need to have a great dynasty? I think you need these 3 things, at least now. Again, if you believe the Redskins had a dynasty in the 80s and 90s, well, they had a different quarterback every Super Bowl they won, but that's not really football today. That's kind of, that was football, which again, we're talking early 90s for the most recent championship, so that's not like that long ago, but still, football's changed a lot in the past 30 years. It has. So, great quarterback, great coach, great GM. These feel like the 3 biggest pillars, right? Those are the 3 most important things. For the Chiefs, do they have these? Well, definitely have Mahomes, great quarterback. Definitely have a great coach, Andy Reid. He'll be a Hall of Famer. And then the great GM, you could argue, is debatable, but Veach is at the very least a good GM, even if he has had some misfires. So, okay, that's all the setup. Well, what do the Chiefs need to do so for me, I think it's not a dynasty unless they win on Sunday. If they win on Sunday, I'm probably going to call it a dynasty. I think you have to win at least 3, in my opinion. I feel that way. There's never been a dynasty that's been considered a dynasty with just 2 championships. Even if you make it to a bunch of Super Bowls, I think you need at least 3 victories. But what can the Chiefs do to be competitive for a long period of time and continue to be competitive in terms of trying to win a Super Bowl, not just making the playoffs? Well, let's use this chart right here as our dynasty tracker, or I guess our championship contention tracker. So typically what you need to be a dynasty or be a championship contender, I should say, is get at least like 12 wins. You could argue maybe 12 is a little low, maybe you need like 13, but again, Chiefs don't even have 12 this year, but be a 12-win caliber team, right? That's kind of what you need to be. That's what you should be aiming for. Well, okay, how do you get those wins? Well, Mahomes should give you 5 a year, I would think, right? I mean, typically your average elite quarterback gets you 4 a year using, PFF has their WAR system and it matches up there. I also did my own study, several years back, and it said kind of the average elite quarterback will give you about 4. Mahomes is a good enough quarterback. I'm willing to say he will give you about 5 a season. So, okay, you're getting a lot of wins just by one player. So what happens if all you do is do an okay job, like a league average job across the board with the other talented players around you, where you just do, have some good players, some not so good players? What I would still get you here, and actually a little bit past here, my graph wasn't that great, but it's 11.7 wins total. That's where you'd be at. So that's a lot. That's a lot of wins. That's nearly at our 12-win mark, simply with just an average coach and an average GM with Patrick Mahomes. And when you factor in that they have, I would say, a good GM, a great coach, and you have got also guys like Chris Jones and Travis Kelce, they're adding extra wins above their contracts. So definitely they're clearing that 12 win mark pretty consistently. So going back to the three things I said you kind of need for a dynasty, I actually don't know if this is true. You definitely need a great quarterback, but it kind of feels like you need either a great coach or a great GM. You don't need both. You need a coach who can give you extra wins, at least 0.3 wins above expected, but maybe a little bit more than that. And for a GM, you need a GM who can give you maybe, we'll say a win more than the average GM gets you. If you can just have one of those two with the Patrick Mahomes level quarterback, you're pretty much going to be in championship contention every year. Now, the question is, can they do that? Because like I said, kind of the other three pieces are the Andy Reid, the Chris Jones, and the Travis Kelce of it all. But how long are those guys going to be there? If you look at the ages of the four key players, Patrick Mahomes is 28. You're hoping for another 10 years out of him. That's what you're hoping. Everything else would be, anything else would be awesome. Can't expect him to play until his 40s. Just because Brady did it doesn't mean everyone's going to do it, right? But if you can get another 10 years out of Mahomes, well, how long is Andy Reid going to coach? I don't know. He could honestly, if he wanted, maybe he could coach the rest of that. He's 65. It's also possible he could retire after this season. Who knows? I feel like people talk about him as if he's like 85 or something, but definitely, who knows how long he will want to coach, but, I don't see why he wouldn't want to keep coaching at this point, especially with the team that he has. Chris Jones is actually only 29. I feel like he's another guy people act like is older than he is, but still, he is 29, and he's a free agent who just held out. They can still tag him, so I think he stays in Kansas City, but that's something to talk about. And also Travis Kelce, guy's 34 years old. Not sure if you heard, but he's dating Taylor Swift. Not something that gets talked about a lot, but maybe he wants to just spend time, away from football at that point. Who knows? But still, it's interesting and definitely worth talking about. So, you have to wonder if Chris Jones leaves and Travis Kelce leaves and Andy Reid retires, well, then that's when Veach is just going to have to step it up, right? They don't need a ton of extra help from Mahomes. You really don't. He's good enough as is. You just have to do okay. The question is really just going to be, can he do that? And the answer is maybe. How will he do that? Well, again, I'll show a chart right here to signify, again, remember, the red here is Mahomes, and then there's yellow and gray. So what do these two things represent? Well, you can choose either one, really, but let's just say yellow is the paid players, the players who are getting a certain amount of money. This could be free agents or guys you drafted and then gave a second contract to. As long as you're not on a rookie contract, you're going to be in the paid player category. And then there is the gray area, which is the draft category. And usually you're going to pay a lot more for the paid players than the drafted players, but hopefully get around the same amount of value from those players. That's usually how it works. You have to make sure you keep a balance there. You have to make sure you get enough talent out of the drafted guys so you don't pay a ton, because eventually you're going to have to start paying other guys. And every championship team in the NFL is going to have some sort of variation of what you see on the screen. Of the quarterback gets you X amount of wins, and then you get enough wins with the players who you're paying enough money to get wins out of, and then enough wins with the players that you drafted. If you can get 12 with that, you should be okay. And it really helps when one player alone is getting you almost halfway there. The other, of course, I think important aspect here is that with the way Mahomes' contract is structured, it's going to continue to get better year after year. The salary cap is rising rapidly, and with the salary cap continuing to rise, Mahomes' value becomes even more of that, because you're going to get more money to still only have to get the same amount of wins, essentially. So because of that, you're going to be in benefit, whereas other teams are going to have to start paying their quarterbacks more and things like that, and aren't getting as much value out of their quarterbacks. So will the Chiefs still be competitive for the next 10 years? I think so. I don't see why they wouldn't continue to be competitive. Again, the quarterback position matters so much in today's NFL that having the best quarterback means you should be in the playoffs every year, and you should be competing for, you should be, I would say, at least doing really good every season. You should be divisional round should be like an average year if you have someone like Mahomes. And currently, conference championship is an average year because they have more than just Mahomes. So that's kind of how I view all of this. I do think that what is the anatomy of a dynasty? That's what I think it is. So what do you think? Well, do you agree? Do you disagree with all of this? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.